Strength is often misunderstood. Many people associate it with the ability to lift heavy weights, to speak with confidence, or to move through life with ease and control. But real strength, the kind that defines who you are at your core, doesn't emerge when the sun is shining and everything is going your way. It doesn't come from convenience, ease, or predictability. True strength is born in the fire of adversity. It grows in darkness, not in daylight. It shows itself not when you're at your best, but when you're brought to your knees and you rise again. Comfort is not a teacher. It doesn't test you. It doesn't challenge you to dig deeper, to stretch farther, to find out what you're really made of. Comfort may feel good, but it is often deceptive. It can lull you into a sense of safety, a false belief that all is well. In that space, there's little growth. You don't learn how resilient you are sitting in a comfortable chair. You don't discover your endurance when everything goes according to plan. You don't uncover your grit, your drive, or your purpose in the moments when life is easy. You find it when it's hard. You find it when you're tired, when you're alone, when you have every reason to stop, but you don't. Adversity is the mirror that reflects your strength back at you. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you didn't know existed. It peels back the layers of who you think you are and shows you who you actually are. When the pressure mounts and everything starts to fall apart, that's when your true nature steps forward. That's when you find out what you really believe, what you truly value, and whether you will collapse or keep going. And the truth is, we all face adversity. No one escapes it. At some point in life, everyone is tested. Some tests come through loss, others through failure. Some come quietly, like the slow erosion of hope over time. Others hit suddenly, like a storm out of nowhere. But in every test, there's a question being asked. Who are you when it's hard? Who are you when nothing is going your way? Who are you when the lights go out and the crowd is gone and there's no applause, only silence? Most people don't realize how strong they are because they only count the visible victories. But some of the greatest wins in life are private. They're the times you got out of bed when your heart felt broken. The moments you chose to try again when everything in you said, give up. The nights you cried in silence, then showed up the next morning like nothing happened. Those are victories. Those are signs of strength that no one may ever see, but you lived through them. Adversity also humbles you. It strips away ego, pride, and superficial things you thought mattered. And in that process, it forces you to build strength from within, not from the validation of others. It forces you to become self-reliant, to develop mental toughness, to rely on your inner compass, even when you're surrounded by chaos. That kind of strength isn't glamorous. It won't always look impressive, but it's real and it lasts. You become stronger not in spite of adversity, but because of it. The most powerful people you know didn't wake up strong. They were shaped by circumstances that demanded more from them than they thought they could give. They faced situations that pushed them beyond their limits and came out different. Wiser, braver, tougher, not perfect, just stronger and more aware of what they're capable of. When things go wrong, when the path is unclear, when you're out of options and running on empty, that's when strength steps in. That's when you find out what you're truly made of. That's when you begin to learn that strength has very little to do with muscles or motivation. It has everything to do with how you respond when life doesn't give you a choice but to fight, to endure, to hold on just a little longer than you thought you could. It's easy to forget your victories when life becomes overwhelming. When you're standing in the middle of another storm, feeling like the weight is too much to carry, your memory plays tricks on you. It tells you this is the worst you've ever felt, the hardest it's ever been, the most uncertain you've ever been about the future. And in that moment, everything you've survived, every mountain you've climbed, every breakdown you've outlasted, every situation that once seemed impossible but eventually passed, fades quietly into the background. But the truth is, You've already overcome more than you remember. There were days when you didn't think you'd make it. Quiet battles you fought behind closed doors, when no one else could hear your thoughts or feel your pain. There were nights filled with doubt and fear, when sleep wouldn't come, and your mind was filled with questions you didn't have answers for. And yet, here you are, still standing, still breathing, still moving forward. You've been through emotional storms, financial stress, heartbreak, rejection, illness, failure, and loss, and you survived. Maybe you didn't come through untouched, but you came through. Sometimes, survival itself is the victory. Maybe you didn't thrive, maybe you didn't have it all together, but you made it to the next chapter. You held on long enough for time to move forward. That matters more than people realize. Because those moments, the ones where everything in you wanted to give up and you didn't, those are the moments that built you. Not the moments when everything made sense, but the ones when nothing did and you showed up anyway. The reason you forget how strong you are is because you weren't keeping score when you were surviving. You weren't tracking your progress in the middle of the chaos. You were just trying to make it through the day. And that's what most people miss about growth. It doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like barely hanging on. It looks like forcing yourself out of bed, showing up to responsibilities when you feel broken inside, or continuing to love others while learning how to love yourself. That quiet endurance, that quiet refusal to collapse completely, is a sign of strength, and it's something you've done more times than you probably realize. Look back, not to dwell in the past, but to remind yourself of what you've come through. Think about the situations that once seemed impossible, the times when you didn't know how you were going to get out, and then one day, you were no longer in it. Think about the moments when you were sure you weren't enough, and yet you managed to figure it out, step by step, with no map, no guide, just the will to keep moving. Think about how many times you were certain you couldn't handle one more thing, but then life gave you one more thing and you handled it anyway. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not quickly, but you did. It's so easy to underestimate your own resilience when you're in the middle of a new struggle. The weight of the present feels heavier than the memory of the past, but your history has layers of strength built into it. Strength you earned the hard way. Strength that isn't written in headlines, but in journal entries, late night thoughts, and quiet tears no one else ever saw. That history lives inside of you. It doesn't go away. It becomes part of your character, your instinct, your voice. You are more experienced than you give yourself credit for. You've navigated complex relationships, walked away from things that weren't right for you, taken risks that scared you, stood up for yourself when it wasn't easy, and adapted to change again and again. And each time you did, you grew. You didn't stay the same. You became wiser, sharper, more aware of who you are and what you're capable of. Even if it didn't feel like growth at the time, even if it just felt like trying to survive, it counted. It mattered, it shaped you, and it's part of the reason you're equipped to face what's ahead. Even when it doesn't feel like it, most people think strength looks like boldness, like raised voices and confident strides. They imagine it's found in loud declarations, in visible action, in the spotlight of achievement. But more often than not, real strength doesn't come with a dramatic entrance. It doesn't come with applause or validation. Strength lives in the quiet, in the private, in the unseen. It's not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who keeps moving forward when no one's watching. There is a kind of strength that goes unnoticed by the world because it isn't meant for display. It's not designed to impress others. It's meant for survival. It's what shows up when you're tired of being tired, when you've cried yourself empty, when your heart is bruised and your spirit is worn down, and yet you still find a way to rise. You still choose to show up for your life, even if all you can do is take one small step. That decision, made in silence, with no recognition or fanfare, is one of the most powerful forms of strength there is. Some of the strongest people you'll ever meet won't talk about what they've been through, not because it wasn't hard, not because it didn't hurt, but because they made a quiet agreement with themselves to keep going. They didn't wait for the conditions to improve. They didn't wait for someone to come rescue them. They learned how to keep putting one foot in front of the other in the middle of the storm. That's not weakness. That's emotional discipline. That's mental resilience. That's strength. The world often rewards the loud, the visible, the external proof of progress. But true power comes from consistency, from doing the hard thing over and over without needing to be seen. It comes from holding yourself together when your world is falling apart and there's no one there to lift you up. It comes from staying loyal to your future when your present is full of pain. That kind of quiet commitment doesn't come from ego. It comes from depth, from character, from the belief, however small or buried, that something better is still possible, even if you can't see it yet. There's strength in the moments where you get up and go to work, even though your soul feels heavy. There's strength in making a phone call, going to an appointment, paying a bill, making dinner, simple acts that become monumental when you're carrying emotional or mental burdens. The world may see it as routine, but inside you know what it took to do it. You know the internal battle you had to fight just to get out of bed. That's not small. That's not ordinary. That is strength in its rawest form. You don't have to feel strong to be strong. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. People wait to feel courageous, confident, energized before they act. But strength often shows up when you feel weak, scared, or lost. It doesn't require you to feel powerful. It only asks that you keep going, that you take the next step, even with trembling hands and a heart full of doubt. It's in those moments that your character is being forged, not when everything feels easy and you're filled with motivation. And sometimes, strength looks like sitting in silence and letting yourself feel what you've been running from, letting the tears fall, letting the fear speak, letting the grief breathe. That's not giving up. That's releasing what's heavy so you can continue. The act of being honest with yourself and still choosing not to quit is a radical form of strength. You don't need to shout to be strong. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. The strength that lasts is the kind you build inside. The kind that keeps showing up even when no one sees the effort. The kind that doesn't ask for attention but earns respect through perseverance. It's quiet, steady, and relentless. It's the decision to move forward, not because everything is okay, but because you refuse to stay stuck where you are. It's easy to downplay survival, to look at where you are right now and think it's not enough, to believe that because you're not where you want to be, somehow you've failed. But there's a truth that's easy to forget when you're surrounded by expectations and pressure. You're still here, you're still standing, and that alone is powerful. You've faced things that others never saw. You've fought battles no one will ever fully understand. There were moments you didn't think you'd make it through. There were days when your energy was gone, when your motivation vanished, when the pain was louder than your hope. You've had to live through things you weren't prepared for, things you never asked for, things you didn't feel strong enough to handle. But you handled them anyway. You didn't crumble. You didn't disappear. Maybe you bent. Maybe you stumbled. Maybe you had to take time to gather yourself. But you're still here. That matters. There's this pressure in society to constantly be achieving, improving, proving, as if your worth is measured only by how much you can accomplish. But the truth is, sometimes just surviving the day is the greatest accomplishment of all. Sometimes the real victory is simply not giving up. The fact that you are still standing means that life hasn't beaten you. You might be scarred, you might be tired, you might not have all the answers, but you're not broken beyond repair. You still have breath in your body and strength in your spirit, and that means possibility still exists. The world tends to applaud resilience, when it looks like success, when the comeback story ends with triumph and transformation. But they don't always see the version of resilience that's quiet, messy, and incomplete. They don't see the kind where you show up to work with a heavy heart, or when you carry responsibilities even though your soul is worn out. They don't see what it takes to raise a child while battling your own demons. They don't see the silent strength it takes to live with anxiety or grief or heartbreak and still keep showing up for life, but you know you've lived it. You've had to rebuild yourself more than once. Maybe you've lost people. Maybe you've watched a dream fall apart. Maybe you've had to let go of something you thought would last forever. Maybe life forced you to grow up faster than you should have. Or maybe it just kept throwing things at you when you were already on the edge. And still you're here, still waking up, still trying, still caring, still reaching for better, even if the steps are small. No one gives enough credit to endurance. People celebrate the finish line, but they overlook the strength it takes just to keep going mile after mile. You are living proof that staying in the race matters. That continuing to walk, sometimes crawl, through pain, confusion, and fear is an act of deep courage. The world might not see what you carry, but that doesn't make it any less real, and it doesn't make you any less strong. You didn't choose everything you've gone through, but you've made choices in how you responded. You could have become bitter. You could have shut down. You could have decided to stop trusting, stop hoping, stop caring. But instead, you kept a piece of yourself alive. Maybe it's buried deep. Maybe it's fragile, but it's still there. The part of you that believes things can get better, that wants to heal, that wants to grow, that refuses to give up entirely. That is not weakness. That is strength in its most essential form. You may not feel proud of everything in your past. You may not love where you are right now, but your story isn't over. And the fact that you're still here, still standing after everything you face, is not something to brush off as nothing. It's not something to overlook or minimize. It's a reflection of every time you could have given up, but didn't. Every time you could have walked away from yourself, but chose to stay and fight. Even if the fight was silent and unseen, one of the greatest myths we're taught about strength is that it's something you have to feel in order for it to be real. That if you don't wake up feeling bold, powerful, and ready to take on the world, then somehow you're lacking. But the truth is, strength doesn't always come with confidence. It doesn't always feel like clarity or purpose. It often comes disguised as uncertainty, fatigue, or even fear. It doesn't feel like strength when you're in the middle of it. It feels like barely holding it together. But that's when it matters the most. Real strength isn't about how you feel. It's about what you choose to do, especially when you don't feel like you can do anything. You can be anxious and still show up. You can be exhausted and still make the next decision. You can be unsure of yourself and still take action. The presence of doubt or fear doesn't cancel out the strength it takes to keep going. In fact, it's often the people who feel the weakest who are carrying the heaviest burdens and still choosing to move forward. There is a quiet power in action without certainty, in doing what needs to be done without needing to be fully ready. Some of the most courageous things you'll ever do will happen when you feel the most unsure, when you feel like everything is falling apart and the easiest option would be to quit. But you don't. You take the next small step. You respond to what's in front of you. You keep showing up not because you feel strong, but because you've learned how to push through the noise of your own self-doubt. Strength is not a mood. It's not a burst of motivation. It's not a perfect mindset. It's not something that shows up only when conditions are ideal. It's a decision, a commitment to carry on even when the circumstances tell you not to. And it doesn't require you to have it all together. It doesn't demand perfection or confidence or complete understanding. It only requires that you not give up completely, that you hold the line, even if it's just for today. So many people wait to feel ready. They wait for the moment when the fear is gone, when the doubt subsides, when they feel like the version of themselves they admire. But that moment may never come, and it doesn't have to. Because the version of you who is confused, afraid, or overwhelmed is still capable of doing hard things. You don't have to wait until you're fearless to take a risk. You don't have to wait until you're sure of yourself to make a move. You don't have to wait to feel strong to be strong. Think about the times in your life when you kept going, even though everything inside of you was screaming to stop. The moments when you didn't think you could handle another blow, but you did. When you doubted your worth, but still showed up for the people you love. When you wanted to disappear, but instead chose to stay, to try, to speak, to act. You didn't feel strong then, but you were. Every step you took while carrying your fear, your grief, your pain, that was strength in motion. There is something deeply powerful about refusing to let your emotions dictate your direction. Not ignoring them, not suppressing them, but acknowledging them while still doing what needs to be done. That's not numbness. That's not coldness. That's a form of emotional maturity and resilience that takes years to develop. And you're doing it probably more often than you give yourself credit for. You're allowed to feel weak. You're allowed to be overwhelmed, to cry, to question everything. Feeling those things doesn't make you any less strong. What matters is that even in those moments, you keep choosing to stay in the game. You keep making the effort, even if it feels small, even if no one else sees it, even if it doesn't look like progress from the outside. That's what strength really is, not something you feel, but something you prove with every difficult decision to keep going when it would be easier to stop. So if no one's told you today, look at everything you've made it through. Look at how many times life could have broken you and it didn't. Not because it was easy, not because you had all the answers, but because there was something in you that refused to let go. That's what strength looks like. It isn't always loud. It doesn't always feel good, but it's real. It's in your decision to keep moving when you're tired, to keep believing when you're uncertain, to keep showing up when everything in you says to stop. You don't need to prove your strength to anyone. The fact that you're still standing is all the proof you'll ever need. You are stronger than you know. And if you can't see it yet, trust that you're becoming it every time you choose not to give up.